is now where we have a lot of space here. Look at all this space. Now we don't have as much. Those vertebrae get closer together, right? We lose some of the fluid in the discs, and that can cause compression on the nerves. That can cause irritation to the joints, and that can be a reason why we get some pain. When you hear the term stenosis, that's what you want to think about. My joints, my spaces in my spine have gotten closer together, and that puts irritation on things. Usually that happens walking, standing. So if you have trouble with those types of things, that might be something that you could be dealing with. The second part, second most common cause of lower back pain, bulge or herniated disc, all right? Usually you're gonna, if you're experiencing that, you're gonna have difficulty when you're bending over, all right? So what that means is these discs that we talked about, these discs are gonna be a little bit, there's gonna be excessive pressure on them, right? And so the pressure starts to push the disc out towards one side. The best analogy they gave us, we had a professor in physical therapy school. He's teaching us in class, talking about discs. He's got a jelly donut in his hand, right? I wasn't trying to suck up, but I was in the first row paying attention that day. So guess who got picked on with the jelly donut? Yeah, you were looking at it. Good thing I like jelly donuts. He comes right up to me and he says, now with our spine, if we're always bending forward and we're sitting a lot, where does all that pressure go? And the answer is towards the front of the vertebrae. If I take this jelly donut and I put all the pressure on the front, and he goes like this right in front of me, luckily he didn't smack down on it, but if he did, all that jelly would have squirted out the back. That's what happens. As a society, we do a lot of sitting, right? There's a lot of pressure in the front of us. We have trouble after we do gardening, after we're doing the laundry, after we're picking up that heavy leaf bag and bending and twisting, and then we wonder, why the heck is my back so sore? A lot of pressure on the front ends up squirting the jelly out the back. It's not exactly what happens physiologically, but it's a great way to start to understand why we've got to move certain ways. Any questions on those? All right, there's going to be a quiz, so fire your questions away. The third is SI joint dysfunction. SI stands for Sports Illustrated, but it also stands for sacroiliac, all right? Sacroiliac. So down here, we talked about the sacrum is our triangular bone. On the sides, that's pretty good. I might have a second career as an artist. That's pretty good. Right here, there's a joint here, all right? This is your ilium. This is your ilium. This is your sacrum. Where the S and the I meet, that's your SI joint, all right? It's debatable. There's a little bit of movement there. You know, some people go back and forth. Is it enough to make a big difference? Clinically, what we see, there's a lot of compensation. Sometimes we look at people and one hip is positioned up higher because of a muscle spasm. Or maybe you were born where one leg is a little longer than the other. If we don't account for that, we don't address that, there can be disproportionate stress, right? Uneven stress placed on one side, and that can irritate things in your SI joint region. Last one, round in the corner. Number 4 is a sprain or a strain. So what happens with sprains and strains? Our back is not just bones and discs, right? There's a lot of muscles that attach and run up and connect and go every which way. If we have some of these compensations, or because of recreational habits or occupational habits, we can have undue stress placed on some of these muscles, and then certain of them pull way too hard one way and they aren't counterbalanced the other. Or certain of them pull way too hard one way and they're not counterbalanced by the other. That most commonly is what can happen with a sprain strain. It can also happen if you overdo it with the yard work. You know, with thinking that I'm back in high school and college and chasing my kids around the backyard, and I pull up and I'm like, oh man, that's a little sore. I'm not as young as I used to be. That's what happens with sprains and strains. When we get to this point of the talk, as physical therapists, again, we help people move well so they can live their life. We're also community members. I'm walking through Market 32 up at the top of Hoosick Street there, and I run into Sally. I'm going through the produce aisle, and Sally's there. We're both in our masks, and I say from a distance, "Hey Sally, it's Joe from physical therapy. How are you doing?" "Oh Joe, it's so good to see you." Now Sally had been in. She had lower back pain with sciatica running down her leg. She did a great job, right? She went through everything. We worked hard. She did her exercises. She was diligent with her home program. She graduated. She got a t-shirt on her last day. She did excellent. She had finished up maybe 2 or 3 months prior to this, maybe 4. And then, so I said, "Hey, how's everything going?" She's a big gardener. She said, "You won't believe it. I'm sitting there. I'm home because we're quarantining and I'm doing a ton of stuff around the house. So we're mulching and we're cleaning out the flower beds, and I was bent over all day long. Later that night, I went to get up from my chair, and I just felt it, and it wrenched right in my back again." And I'm like, smokes. I had my blueberries, and I'm like, I probably shouldn't have blueberries. They're not in season, but I still always go for the blueberries for some reason. And I almost dropped the blueberries right there. I said, I'm thinking to myself, we worked so hard at this, and then it wrenched, right? You've got to take this stuff into consideration. You got to think to it. We'll get back to Sally's story in a little bit. What is the secret to a healthy back? How do we sustain it? How do we keep these results? How do we manage our symptoms? How do we know what to do? There's really 3 essential elements to putting an action plan together when we talk about this stuff. Number 1, we're down to that section, the secret to a healthy back. Number 1, knowledge is power. If you understand, you don't want to become reliant on something. You want to have that knowledge, right? Knowledge is power. We've all heard the saying, "Hey, no pain, no gain." We flip it, right? We didn't come up with it, but we heard it from someone else. No pain, K-N-O-W. If you know which types of pain, if you know why you have the pain, now you can know gain. You can K-N-O-W. You can know how to make those gains. What is okay? What's not okay? I want a garden. How do I offset that? It's the same thing in your car, right? You jump in your car, you go for a drive. You drive from here to California, you're probably going to have to stop, change your tires, put more air in the tires, change your oil, and change your gas more frequently than if you drive from here to Cohoes, right? But we don't think of our bodies that same way. So if you have that knowledge, if you understand, then you can start to offset. Being proactive versus reactive. How can we put a plan in place to get ahead of some of this stuff? As opposed to, what do? We go back to that car analogy. Man, that car's making a funny noise. Let me just roll the windows down. That'll drown it out. Let me just turn the radio up. That'll drown it out. Until the car's smack dead on the side of the road. Shoot, I should have stopped and put some gas in this thing, right? But that's a lot of times what we do with our body. Oh man, I got a little ache and pain. It'll go away. I got a little ache and pain. It'll go away. Until, when do we seek help? Shoot, I can't go walk anymore. I can't lift my grandkids, right? So proactive. What's the proactive approach versus reactive? And then addressing the root issue, not just the symptom. We talk a lot about sometimes that lower back pain, right? Are we addressing everything? You want to address the root cause. If I come into the kitchen and there's water pouring through the ceiling, a couple things I have to do. I probably should put a bucket or something under that water, water leaking through. At the same point, at some point, I should go upstairs and figure out, is the tub overflowing? Do I have a roof leak? What's going on? If all I do is treat the symptoms, all I do is treat that water leak, I haven't gotten to the underlying cause. Does that make sense? So with your lower back, what we talk about there is, are the hips moving to take stress off? Is your mid back moving well enough? And learning out how to take stress off of the lower back and go from there. Really, there's 3 phases to an individual assessment. There's a screen, which is part of today. So everyone pull out that screen sheet. So that should be the questionnaire behind your handout. And go ahead, don't overthink it. Just kind of think through individually what each question is asking you. And you're either going to agree or disagree. You can't circle both. That's not allowed. Take a quick minute.
You need one?
Fill those screens out.
Oh. Cappy already did her homework.
Oh, proactive versus reactive. Now, if anybody is watching this on the replay or watching this virtually, feel free to comment there in the box, and Aaron or myself can get you a copy of the screen as well.
This could affect our legs too, obviously.
100% it can affect your legs.
That's on my page.
Yep. So what happens with that, whether it's the disc pushing out or the vertebrae getting closer together, there are nerves that exit through that area. So if there's more pressure on the nerves will send signals of pain. Twitching, yep. Nerves are really primarily responsible for three things in our body. Our reflexes, right? We've all been to the doctor to tap our knee. I had a patient one time sitting on the table. I test his reflexes on the right side. Real joker, this guy. What's he do? I hit the right leg, he kicks the left leg. Good thing I wasn't fresh out of PT school. That one would have thrown me for a loop. So the reflexes, right? Sensation, right? So numbness, tingling, pain, cold, burning. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then also strength, which confuses a lot of people sometimes. We think our muscles control our strength, right? The muscles contract, but the muscles have to receive their electrical input, the impulses, from the nervous system. So if the light switch isn't working, doesn't matter if I go to Home Depot and buy a $300 light switch, the best light switch out there, it's still not going to work if the current isn't getting to that box. That's how our muscles work, so that's how the nerves contribute to the strength of the legs. How did everybody do with your screen? Pretty good? All right. So that screen is part of today. That's really the broad view, right? That's if we're in an airplane and we're looking down on the Capital District, right? Gives you a broad view, a broad overview. Next is a consultation. What is a consultation? That's where you sit down and you learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of your specific situation, right? We go through broad movement patterns. We individualize it to the symptoms that you're experiencing. And then the third is a multifactorial examination, all right, where we go through and individually test these things on a very specific basis, all right? That's where we do the nerve assessment, individual joint assessments, what each of these muscles are doing, those types of things, and that's the examination. With the screen, we're going to go through and we'll help you determine kind of that broad view. Are you in a low category, a moderate, or high risk category? Let's jump down to the number one single biggest mistake that we see people make when we're talking about lower back pain or sciatica, right? Sciatica is that irritation to the lower back. They ignore it. Number one biggest thing, it's not they didn't do this fancy exercise, it's not they didn't get this fancy treatment, it's that they just wished and prayed it would go away, right? So you ignore it. So that's number one. If you do nothing, you can't, right? It's kind of that old saying, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So, kind of don't just let it be present, but ask yourself, how can I take some control back? Number two, alter it or modify it, right? Well, it hurts when I pick those bags of leaves up. Hey, Aaron, can you come pick this bag of leaves up? Right? That's altering my activity. That's altering what I do. Well, I used to bend over and do it this way. Now I kind of just do it this way, right? Sometimes that's okay if things are in an acute phase, but if that goes on for too long, now you've really changed how you're doing things. You've altered it. Another way to alter things, if we've gone through back to market 32, right? We've all seen it, or I've even, right? And then you lean over and go, yeah, that takes the pressure off my back, right? And we alter how we walk.
That's the way I wash dishes.
That's the way you wash
up the sink.
Exactly. Yep. Hey, yeah, you got it. The other thing is, right, Advil, Aleve. I worked with a state trooper, and he came in after 3 years of lower back pain, taking a lot of Advil each day, right? And you see it on the commercials, like, take this Aleve and it'll get you through your day. Well, that's all right, but if you're going with months, if you're going with weeks, months, or years with this, after 4 weeks, he wasn't taking any of it because he learned how to manage it. He learned which exercises were best for him to go from there. So taking those types of medications is another way to alter the pain sensation, right? And then there's address it, right? How do I address this? I'm not saying Advil's bad. I'm not saying Alev's bad. If your doctor, recommends it, if your pharmacist recommends it and it's right for you, that's okay. But can you do other things to help so you don't become reliant on that? And how do you put that actionable plan in place to go from there? So back to Sally, right? Luckily I didn't drop the blueberries. Sally's mulching. Later that night she gets out of her chair. She's like, oh shoot. I said, Sally, you look like you're moving around. How long ago was that? She's like, Joe, that was like 6 days ago. And I said, well, what happened? She said, I remember when I had that sheet. I still had the exercise videos on my phone. And I remembered you said every time I'm doing more of this, I need to do more of my exercises. And she said, to be honest, I kind of got lax because I was feeling so good. And when I started to think about it, I had put so much more stress this way. The garden looks beautiful, my back hurt. I just started doing the exercise. Within 2 days, I was better. She goes, this was happening to me 2 to 3 times a year. And it would knock me down for weeks, 4 to 6 weeks at a time, where I'd have to alter things. She said, so I'm doing great. She said, have a great weekend. She had my heart. My heart was like, oh, perfect. All right, Sally, have a good one. So that's really, that's what you want. Knowledge is power. How can you understand and manage it and go from there? All right, so there's a little bit of an algorithm here. So we want to talk through risk categories. So go ahead and add up the ones. I think you got a 1 if you agreed with the statement and a 0 if you disagreed. Is that correct? Yeah, so go ahead and add up all your 1s, and that'll give you a total. And then you can use
a screen for
that algorithm. Yep.
In your computer?
Right for mine. Yep.
Okay.
You could use that algorithm to go through and trace it down. So total score, did you get 3 or less? Low risk category. 4 or more, now you want to go down, right? You want to check your sub-score. So then if you had 4 or more, go check and see what your answers were to questions 5 through 9. Add that total up for questions 5 through 9. If the total for that subset of 5 through 9 was less, 3 or less, you're in the medium risk category. 4 or more, high risk. Does anybody want me to double check their screen scores for them? Got it? Does anybody need a calculator?
I don't see it in here.
Now, what you said was 1 and 1?
Oh, you lied. Yep, you're correct. I apologize about that. 4 through 8. There was a mistype. So count on 4 through 8, not 5 through 9. Apologize. I misspoke.
What? 2 each?
It's on the scope, it's 4 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so 4 would be, so that's where it's easy to move that.
Here's just that screen. You can verbally circle which one you agree or disagree with.
Okay, yeah, this is one.
Shoulders and
Okay. That's an excellent question, and there's subsets. So the reason the shoulder and neck is on there is because there's been certain research studies that show people that have both areas you put in different categories. So that shoulder and neck is supposed to be there, and it's from a certain subset of research. In order to determine if you have maybe a disc injury